Well, good morning everybody and welcome back to the Hopkins Demonstration Forest. We are actually inside today and I wanted to do a quick video about tree identification, specifically the native trees here in Oregon, both Conifer and Broadleaf. And I've done this video a few times and I just thought I want to document it and show you a couple resources. So some of you might know some of the plants out there, but the first thing that we need to do is get a guide or some sort of key. So a couple of resources. A really good one that I think it's a good desk copy. It's kind of thick and heavy, but Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast, Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, and Alaska. That's a long word. We often refer to this just as the Pojar for the first author. But a good book for maybe high school, early college actually, but a very popular book that we like to use that just identifies the trees. The Pojar book is pretty comprehensive. A very popular Oregon State University Extension publication, Trees to Know in Oregon. And what it has in it, first of all, some definitions about the different parts of a tree and the terminology we use. So as you go through the guides and what I'm going to show you, you might have to look up some of these words on the internet. Great resource, easily found. But in the Trees to Know book, they identify things like the shape, the patterns of the leaves, and the key parts that you're going to be identifying to figure out which tree it is. But what we have in here is something that maybe you've seen before, and it's called a dichotomous key. A dichotomous key, it's kind of a fancy word for, I call it a true-false test, or basically breaking down into two parts. And those two parts are a yes-no question. So we're going to go through that, but a lot of people don't have this Trees to Know book. So there's another resource that we're going to use, and that is a website, Oregon State University. Common Trees of the Pacific Northwest. If you search that up on Google, Common Trees of the Pacific Northwest, Oregon State University, it'll lead you right to the website. But better yet, it's a pretty easy webpage, oregonstate.edu/trees. Doesn't get a whole lot easier than that. So we're going to go to that webpage and I'm going to guide you through it real quick as we identify some of these trees in front of you. But let's get to the web page here real quick. It's oregonstate.edu/trees. It brings you this web page. You'll notice over here there's a few buttons. Trees, their common name. So every tree has a common name. They also have a scientific name. But we're just going to get right into this and go to the word right there, dichotomous key. Click on it. And it comes up, talks a little bit about the guide. You can read that on your own, but come down here and it's going to get us to that true, false, yes, no question. The first question asked in the dichotomous key, is the tree conifer or is it a broadleaf? So what's the definition? Well, down here it tells a little bit about them, but I think most of you probably know conifers have needles or scales, very short needles. Broadleaf have very flat, wide, thin leaves. So we're going to start by doing a pretty easy one. And well, a lot of you probably can recognize this. Obviously you can recognize that it's needle-like. So we're going to click right here on conifer. And that's where the question is going to break that down. Is it needle-like or scales? So it's definitely needles. Give you a quick example of what scales look like. Here is one. We might try to identify that really quickly later. But you can see, you can't really see the needles, but they're tiny, tiny little packed in their needles. Almost looks like the skin of a snake. The next question you have to ask yourself, are the needles clustered or are they single? So I have an example right here of what a cluster looks like. If I take and look really close and I look at these needles and I grab a tuft of them and pull them off, what I have are on little bunches, I have two attached together. So these tend to come in 2 to 5 clusters or more. So the needles are not clustered. And then the next question, are they sharp and short, or are they longer than ½ an inch? Remember, when you look at these, you got to make sure the average needle. So those needles were definitely longer than ½ an inch. There's my finger. So longer than ½ an inch. Now this is kind of a tough one. I always get really tricked on this. It's very hard to see. Sometimes a magnifying glass helps. But it asks, are there tiny pegs on the twigs or no pegs? So what do they mean by that? Well, I've got an example here that I don't think it's really easy to see, even up close and in person with a magnifying glass. But if you look really close at some of these needles, and you got to look really closer probably in this camera, you'll notice there's a little piece of brown at the bottom of the needle where it attaches to the branch. And you can pull them off sometimes, but it's really kind of hard to tell. But when I look at this plant here or tree, it's kind of got a tiny brown spot at the bottom, but no, that's just part of it. It's not really much of it. So I know this camera's probably not getting close enough to maybe see that, but sometimes you got to look close. It's the trickiest one out there on this dichotomous key. But on the species or plant we're looking at, there are no pegs. So we're going to continue on. Now, this is one, again, the other tricks of doing plant identification. What are the buds? That's where the new growth happens. And so what we have to do is take a close look at the end of the branch. And if you know what time of year it is and this video is being shot, it is springtime. You're looking at the new growth from here all the way down. So this is where the new growth came from, the old buds. And so you can see the size of my thumb next to those. And there are the new ones, and they're still growing. But if we take a close look at those, I will tell you they look like they are oblong, they're clustered of 3, and they're pointed. And they're going to probably grow, knowing what this came from and seeing the remains of them, they're going to get probably 3 or 4 times bigger than that by the time summer sets in. So they definitely have the buds are pointed, for one, and they will eventually grow to become large. So we click there, and lo and behold, what do we have? The Douglas fir. So most of you could hopefully guess that plant if you've done any time out in the forest. But we also have another identifying factor, which is very important, the cone. Douglas fir has a very distinct cone. So sometimes you have to look for other identifiers like the fruit that's growing on it, in this case a cone, and also the bark of a tree can tell you. But you have to kind of sneak around and look underneath the trees to find some of those different clues. Sometimes it's hard to climb up in the tree. So let's go through and quickly identify another conifer. And we'll go back to home. Go to our dichotomous key and start over again. And let's do a real quick one here, another conifer. And let's do that first one I showed you, I think, the one that had the scales. So it's a conifer, and then leaves are flat and scale-like. Some leaves not sharp, some leaves short and sharp. Yeah, they're definitely, not all of them are sharp. I like to say when I do this, I take the tree and I rub it in my hand. If I'm not going, ouch, and that kind of hurts, yeah, they're not all very sharp. So it's not the giant sequoia. So now here's the one you have to find. It's a little more challenging. We have to find a cone. And if you look really close at these cones here, and I got this on the branch, if I pick one off and hold it, it resembles almost like a rose. So definitely they're not. And the question is, do they look like a rosebud or a duckbill? Well, since I'm a beaver fan here, I'm glad it's not the duckbill, it's the rosebud. And we click there, and what do we have? It's a western red cedar. So again, this is a real easy thing to do. Conifers are actually what I like to start out with because they are probably more the simpler, more straightforward. But a more challenging one to do are the broadleaf trees. And this is where terminology really starts to come in, and you have to understand some of the shapes you're looking at. So the first thing it asks after you decide that it is a broadleaf tree is you need to decide, are the leaves compound or simple? So some leaves grow on a stem, and they have little leaflets that make up that entire leaf. I didn't have an example out here today, but Oregon ash is a good example. I didn't want to use a non-native that I have a black walnut, but we're going to be looking at the leaves are simple. So one leaf per stem, no leaflets. And then this is where you now have to look at some patterning. So are the leaves opposite? Let's get rid of that one. Are the leaves opposite or alternate? So you can see right here, the stem breaks out to a simple leaf on each side. So the leaves are opposite. Check that. Most of you can probably guess the one. I'm using some easy ones. Your job is to go find some harder ones maybe. Are the leaves lobed? What's lobed mean? What's those high ridges that go in and out? So we are definitely lobed. It's not smooth. And if it's a lobed leaf that is opposite, it is a maple. Now there are several different types of maple. You might find that vine maple, but obviously from the look and size of these leaves, that's a big leaf. So I'm guessing you can probably call that a big leaf maple. So pretty easy plant. But now if we go back to that dichotomous key, it gets a little more tricky with the broadleaves. Let's look at the leaf pattern. Is it opposite or alternate? So there's one, one, one. So now it is an alternate pattern. So click alternate. Are the leaves lobed or not lobed? Well, those are unlobed leaves. And then this one, often it's referred to as the margin or the edge. Is it smooth or the edge not smooth? So if we take a close look at this, again, we can see it's got these little tiny teeth, almost like a little hacksaw. So they are not smooth. Thick and leathery or soft. And if you can roll it between your fingers real easy, that is a non-thick and leathery leaf. And this is where the challenge with a lot of broadleaf plants come in. The fruit is very important for an identifier for most people that are starting out. There's some other keys that we can look at, or cues, but when I looked on this tree, I didn't have any that I could reach, but if I looked up top, I could see some fruit that was fleshy, and it appeared to be small in size and just coming out. Again, it's early in the season, but it looked more like a cherry. And then here's the last one. Are the leaves blunt or are they pointed? Well, that's a very, very pointed leaf. So I click there. And it comes out that it's a cherry or a plum. So those are the plants that I'm going to do right here today. You can go out in the woods, again, native plants only. And down here, the nice thing is there are these mystery trees. And what it does is it allows you to pick a tree and you get to look at it. It gives you the description about it. So you got to remember that description, and you go through the dichotomous key and work your way through it. And you can do this right from the seat of your home, but I prefer, since we're able to get out and about a little more, is maybe take a trip out. Come on out to Hopkins. You know, you're welcome to take a sample with you, or a little piece of plant back with you, or bring your phone and check right there on the spot. There's lots of apps that you can snap pictures and do all the quick and easy technology stuff, but honestly, it's sometimes kind of nice when you can just go out with a good old-fashioned piece of paper, and if you don't have the book handy, you got the resource online, or maybe on a smartphone or something. But sometimes it's fun to work your way through it on your own rather than having some computer figure it out for you.